Highlights from the second series of The Fall and Rise of Reginald Perrin are now available on this BBC video. Now, something else, again, can be seen over on BBC Two in just over 5 minutes, starring impressionist Rory Bremner. While here on One in a moment, Sir Robin Day chairs another question time.
In the Money Programme on Sunday, as the world's money markets wait for tomorrow's crucial American trade figures, we report from Germany, whose new plans to cut spending and raise taxes will not help America's huge trade deficit. German unemployment is rising, their economy is slowing down. So why are the Germans so frightened of spending more? Plus a report from Northern Ireland, where underneath this bleak hillside lie thousands of tons of lignite or brown coal, a new energy resource that could fire Britain's first commercially run power station. That's the Money Programme on Sunday at 6:30 on BBC Two.
Now on BBC One, Sir Robin Day finds himself for the very first time the token man on the panel of Question Time.
Hello, good evening and welcome to Question Time for 60 minutes of lively argument on topical questions raised by our audience here. And around the table with me, for the first time ever, an all-woman panel. Angela Rumbold MP, Minister of State in the Department of Education, responsible for schools. Mrs. Rumbold has had much experience in local government. That was before becoming an MP. She was Deputy Leader of Kingston Borough Council. She is a strong Thatcherite and used to be a member of the Monday Club, the right-wing Monday Club. She has had a swift rise in Parliament, and one Westminster wit has said, quote, "If you're looking for the next woman to sit in Mrs. Thatcher's cabinet, Angela's your man." The Right Honourable Baroness Seear is leader of the Liberals in the House of Lords. She is an economist and taught for over 30 years at the LSE. She also worked in industry for 12 years. Baroness Seear stood for Parliament 7 times, but never got into Westminster until she became a life peer. Joan Lestor MP is a Labour Member of Parliament. She was a member of the party's National Executive Committee for 15 years, and she was chairman of the Labour Party in 1978. She speaks from Labour's front bench now on development and cooperation. Joan Lestor was formerly a junior minister in the Education Department and in the Foreign Office, but she resigned from the Wilson government in 1976 because of Labour's education cuts. Harriet Crawley, author, journalist, broadcaster and businesswoman, was a Tory candidate at the last election. She made headlines then because at the time she was an expectant unmarried mother, and also because when the result was declared, her Labour opponent, Ken Livingstone, had a much reduced majority. At the Tory party conference in the autumn, Harriet Crawley made a rebellious speech attacking the government's treatment of the nurses in the NHS. There we are, and here we go, and our first questioner is Mr. Ian Franklin, who's the company director. Mr. Franklin, please.
In view of the near collapse of the Alliance merger talks, Sir Robin, I wonder what advice the members of the panel would offer to David Steele, Robert McLennan, and indeed David Owen.
What advice would you offer, Joan Lestor?
Oh, I'm beyond giving them advice, and I think they're probably beyond taking advice, so I'm not here to offer advice to people that are in that situation. I think it's a tragic comedy, if you like, what we are now witnessing. Today and yesterday have been like a sort of a charade, if you like a serial, going on and on. They're breaking, they're not breaking, they're negotiating, they're not negotiating, they're rewriting, they're not rewriting. Is David Steele still leader? Is he not still leader? I haven't got any advice to offer them at all. I think that in a way it would be an intrusion upon private grief, but I do think that what we have seen in this last day or two has really been a spectacle that has contributed nothing to the development of political thought in this country, and I think in a sense must have been a very great disappointment to large numbers of people.
Mrs. Rumbold.
Well, I remember somebody once saying to me that if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. Now, it looks to me as though we've got an example here of if you live by merger, you're going to die by merger, and perhaps David Steele might ponder that a little bit, because certainly yesterday must have come as a great surprise to him, given that there's been a great deal of expectation, I think, on the part of the British public, that at long last there was going to be coherent policies coming from this merged group of politicians to produce the much expected third force in British politics. And perhaps one ought to advise them that before one starts raising the expectations of the British public that there may be a third force, they should at least conduct a fairly democratic arrangement of asking what their own members of Parliament and their own supporters really want as policies. Because it did seem to me that yesterday we had an example of two people standing up and saying, well, here are the policies, and everybody's saying, excuse me, but those aren't our policies after all. And some of the policies, I might say, were pretty interesting policies when you think that a government that is always accused of being extremely right-wing and radical has always come out firmly against the idea of introducing VAT, for example, on children's clothes or on food. And whilst one agrees maybe that one should be good Europeans, nonetheless, I think it's quite important that we should remember we're batting against that in this country for our own personal reasons. So my advice to the parties, if they want to take it, and I imagine they don't, would be that they should most certainly get their ideas all sorted out before they go public, because it does tend to make people rather nervous when they look at a party that was supposed and could have been, perhaps, in charge of a government. They promised us that they were going to be the ones that were in charge of the government in June, and a hung parliament, and they could have been the people governing this country, and they can't even manage to produce an idea, as a group of ideas that will hold together for more than a day.
Baroness Seear.
Well, of course, you're a bit out of date, if I may say so, because when you talk about the collapse, well, of course, there has been today a very considerable change in the position, and you will see, I think, without doubt, that the merger goes ahead. This point that you've made about this great deal being made by the press, and the press, of course, knows a great deal more about what's going on than the people inside the party, and what they don't know they make up, but we're used to that in the press. What was put forward was some additional ideas. I personally think it would have been better if they hadn't done it like that. But when Mrs. Rumbold talks as if there was no agreed policy, we fought an election on an agreed policy. And those particular points which were picked up were not in that policy, that is true. And I think it would have been wiser if they hadn't put them in there. They were asked to produce a statement, a stance for the party to go ahead. I think you will find when you open your papers tomorrow, and I'm not going to tell you what's there, I will quote a previous Liberal Prime Minister, wait and see, that in fact they're getting their act together very considerably. Don't write them off until you see what happens at both Blackpool and at Sheffield.
Harriet Crawley.
Well, if Baroness Seear is right and they merge, how do they merge? Because they don't agree. I think we're in an almost unique situation in British politics. You've got the Alliance scrabbling for a consensus within their party, and you've got the Labour Party scrabbling for a consensus among the voters. The only party that's got both its voters and its party on its side is the Conservative Party. It is a fiasco. David Owen must be a happy man this evening. He's in the seat of I told you so. The only trouble is I don't think that the SDP policies are strong enough to make him what he wants to be, which is the new Labour Party. But actually it'd be better for British politics if they did evolve the SDP as a new Labour Party, in my opinion.
Mr. Franklin, you asked the question. What do you say to what you've heard?
Well, as a member of the Alliance and a long-term member of the SDP, I would ask all three leaders to visit the Buckingham constituency, where we have had a merged party for 3.5 years, and it works very well.
Exactly.
And we believe that on the ground it can work, and that the leadership doesn't reflect the real feelings of the membership.
Well, your invitation will have been noted by the leaders, and we'll see whether they accept it. But could I just call on Mr. Coulson, who is a retired gentleman who also has a question on the same area? We'll take that into the discussion before we have some more questions. Mr. Coulson?
Yes, Sir Robin.
Yes.
In view of the same shambles and the presentation of the programme by the Social and Liberal Democratic Party, should David Steele and Bob McLennan not resign now?
Right, let's just have short answers to that. Baroness Seear.
No, if you had seen the parliamentary party as I have seen it today and yesterday, you would realise that he's got very strong support. The area of agreement is vastly wider than the area of disagreement. What we are bringing together in the merger is a non-socialist opposition to Thatcherism, and that's what this party is crying, this country is crying out for. And I may say to David Owen, and I greatly regret that David Owen has not stayed with us, that all those things which he has said separate us, I, in those 7 long times on which I fought as a Liberal candidate, have had in my own election address. The differences between us are manufactured differences.
Do you think they should resign, the leaders, briefly?
I don't necessarily think they should resign, but I do think they should make up their mind who is going to be leader, because the one thing that you have to have if you're going to have a credible party for people to vote on is a clear leader and a clear set of policies.
Do you think they should resign, Joan Lestor? That's
I
the
couldn't
question.
care less whether they resign or not.
No,
I
but
think,
Mr. Coulson does. He wants the benefit of your
I'm
view.
not going to advise the Liberals and the Alliance and the rest of them how they should conduct their shambles of affairs. I mean, I might improve it for them, but that isn't my aim in life.
Harriet Crawley, do you think
Yes.
they should resign?
I personally don't see how David Steele can go on leading a party that doesn't follow him. The ideas he's put down in this leaders' document are not the ideas we are told that most Liberals want. How
What do
can
you
he
say to
fail?
Mr. Coulson?
I agree entirely with the last speaker, Sir Robin. He proposed merger, he pushed the merger forward. The proposals it contained must have received his agreement, so I think the least he can do is resign.
Right, let's have some more
Personally,
people.
on the national policy basis, I don't think it matters.
After the general election, after all the Liberals been telling us